A lot of mixing engineers these days might completely replace the kick drum during mixing, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't want to fully replace the kick and want to enhance the natural kick, you'll need to take a different approach. And in this clip, Max shows us what he likes about the natural kick, but shows us what's lacking by layering in samples to reinforce the missing elements. Check it out.
Because right now, it's a good time to add a little bit of the sample to the kick. That's what we're gonna do now. And then we'll probably try some things with the snare, maybe a sample.
So let me just
Yes.
point out that I think where a lot of people go wrong is that, you know, a lot of people really want to know how to mix natural drums, but they will have gone to the sample way, way earlier. And basically what you did was you got it sounding great as possible on its own.
Yeah,
And now
exactly.
you're bringing those in. Like
Yes,
you're
yes,
not
yes.
they're not there to make something that's weak suddenly sound good. It's there to enhance something that's already powerful.
Of course. And again, it depends on what you have. If you have, let's say you
Well,
have a good
obviously.
drummer,
Yeah.
yeah, and you have, let's say, an okay tracking, but it's super dry and the room is absolutely dead, then you will use a lot of samples to bring in the room samples for the snare and for the toms. Or you have a horrible drummer and you still got to do something with it, then you're just saving the overheads the way you can, and you maybe even build the whole drum mix on the samples. That's also a way to go. But right now, right here, I'm almost 100% happy. I just want some more coloration and maybe something completely unnatural for the snare sample, and something very minor just to make the low end even more consistent and even more fat for the kick. And usually when I'm blending the samples, I ask my assistant to do the hit points one by one. So he opens the hit points in Cubase, and we detect them, and then we just go and we move manually each hit point. That's quite a job, but for me, that's the most precise way to get like this. I move each hit point. I actually turn on auto scroll and I press next or backwards, and I check each hit and I just move it the place where the transient starts. These are actually fine, and just make sure that there is no no misfiring like this. And he just goes through each and every hit for me. And then he converts these to MIDI, create MIDI notes. And we have this MIDI file here. Well, right now it's empty, but it would contain all the hit points. Then he works on the velocities so that velocities are right. And I feed that MIDI to the sampler. I do that when I blend a lot of the sample in, like 50-50. In this case, and also I do that if the drummer is a little weaker than this, and if the hits are not that consistent, then I definitely do not rely on the automatic mode. But in this case, the drummer is using a little bit of the sample, so I won't really bother with MIDI. I will just use play trigger because it's great. And guys, I'm not shy of using good old kick 10 here because we will be using just a tiny little bit of it. Maybe I will choose something else right now, who knows. So we'll boost the volume and I'll add some low cut here just to make transient fast. And actually, yes, I wasn't thinking. I trigger the trigger with D6, but I can trigger the trigger with an amazing SM91 or Beta 91, which has way more transient information and great bleed level. So And I don't want any dynamics here because it will be so quiet in the mix. I will process the curve, so I will just do this. So it's triggering more or less correctly. Now let's make it quieter. And I instantly feel like I don't want that honkiness in this kick. So I only want the fundamentoid and maybe some of the 3K firmness. I don't want this. And once again, it's a secondary track. It's very quiet in the mix, so I'm not afraid to botch it with the EQ. I'm okay with doing some crazy thing. Now let's hear. I'll bring it up a little bit again. I will bring the kick 6 dB quieter, and I will bring up the kick 10 higher, because now I want them to sound more or less equal to check the phase relationships. Then I will back off the kick 10 again. But while listening to the phase relationships, I want them to sound equally loud. So let's say it's our blend for now. Don't tell me it's already working. So once again, my aim is to find the best correlation between the sample and the live drum. And what I want to right now, I'm quite happy. So when the kick is in its regular phase, it sounds okay. The low end is huge. If I flip the phase, the low end goes away. No low end. I just want to make sure what happens if I apply high pass to the hypersample kick, because right now the hypersample goes to the stereo out. It doesn't even go to the drums, to the drum group. So as you remember, we don't have an individual high pass on the kick group. We have it on the drums group. So right now, I like how hypersample blends to the high passed live kick. What happens if I high pass the kick 10? It might become better or it might become worse. I'll choose the exact same frequency and exact same cue. So they work well together again. I can clearly hear the difference, and it sounds better with phase intact. But now I will compare it with high pass on and off, because something felt better to me with the high pass off at the kick 10. It just sounded fuller, bigger, and way lower, like down to 20 hertz, which I loved. And of course, I cannot hear 20 hertz. I just use it as, as a term. Deep, fat, big, low end. That's what I was talking about. Maybe it sounds a little prettier, a little bit more precise with the high pass on the sample, but it sounds a little bit more thin, for the lack of the better word. And it's almost like I hear more of this honkiness. But as soon as I turn off the high pass here, maybe because kick 10 is a pre-processed kick, maybe he had some sort of a high pass on it. I don't know. So without the high pass, they just add up the way I want. It adds a little bit more of that oomph, adds more of that almost like synthesized low end. Now I will bring the sample down, maybe, I don't know, 6 dB. And I will bring the kick back 6 dB, and we'll hear it in the context of the drums. And what I want to do, I will turn the sample on and off. I don't know if you're hearing it, but I can clearly hear that the kick character does not change, but it instantly has more low end and it sounds more even. And that's what I want from the sample here. And that's why I'm using such a trivial sample. That's why I'm not using something more, unique and specific, because it's just like the Pet City sample from Alesis D4. It's just the sample that helps reinforce, and it does it so well that why do I need anything else? I might add a tiny bit more of 3 or 4K on the sample because I want it to sound a little bit firmer and more even in that range too. So why I did this? First, I tried the 12 dB curve bell, and it just shows me one section of that 2 to 4K range, which I kind of like in Kick 10. It's cool. Very outdated, but it's cool. And then I realized that I want all of that. So I choose the 24 dB per octave, the bell, and now it represents both this and this. It represents both 2K and 5K, let's say, roughly speaking. Then I brought it up like almost 5 dB, and it sounded very firm, but I started hearing kick 10. I don't want to hear kick 10. I only just want to feel. I want to have that impression of a very consistent metal kick. So I brought it back to like 2.5 dB. So it's there, it's firm, but it doesn't dominate the natural kick drum. That's how I think I will leave it for now because I like it.